Bellerín, otro defensor, otro disparo, Monreal, gol. Marca el futbolista español, marca Nacho Monreal. Pim, pam, pum. Pim, pam, pum. Pim, pam, pum. Nacho Monreal. Pim, pam, pum. Nacho Monreal. Nacho Monreal. Nacho. Pim, pam, pum. Nacho Monreal. Pim, pam, pum. Pum, pum. Pim, pam, pam. Pim, pum, pum. Pim, Nacho Monreal. Pum, pum, pum. Pim, pam, pam. Nacho, pum, pum.
This is Arsecast Extra.
Hello and welcome to another Arsecast Extra, as always, with James from Gunnerblog. James, good morning to you.
Good morning to you too, Andrew. How you doing?
I'm all right. I'm now fully vaccinated.
Congratulations.
Thanks. Felt very weird on Saturday. I got my second one on Friday evening and felt a bit,
Did you?
yeah, a bit, can't quite describe it. I wasn't ill, but I was like, I got up to do the blog on Saturday morning and it took me about 5 minutes to work out the keyboard, the typing keyboard. I was just like one character over for about 5 minutes when I was typing, which was a bit disconcerting, but eventually
Yeah, they don't list that
figured it
among
out.
the side effects, weirdly.
No,
But
they don't. It's a new
They
one.
should
I've
have warned
discovered
you.
it. Yeah. Your typing may become impaired due to this
But-
Pfizer vaccine.
But it was temporary.
Thankfully, it was temporary, and I figured it out,
goodness.
you know, so I'm feeling pretty happy about that situation. How are you?
I'm good. I'm still only half vaccinated. But I am being, for work reasons, tested so often at the moment. I mean, it's a nice, reassuring feeling. I get tested basically every other day. So at least I know that I'm all right. But yeah, I managed to. Little tip for people in the UK, actually.
Okay.
I had a booking for my second vaccine in August, and I went into the NHS's online system, and you can check before you cancel it if you're able to move it forward.
Right.
They show you the available appointments before you cancel. So I was actually able to move it forward like 3 or 4 weeks. So my second one's now just in a couple of weeks. So if you
Okay.
are in a hurry to get yourself vaccinated, you can go on the NHS website and see if you can get it even sooner.
There you go. Are you having to get like the gigantic Q-tip up your nose test all the time?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you get
It's
used
both
to it?
tonsils and one nostril. Yeah, I'm completely used to it at this point.
Right.
I've even had to do quite a few on myself as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, no thanks. No.
They just say push until you feel resistance. That's what the instructions say. I know, it's not a nice phrase.
No, not at all. So look, how have you been enjoying the football since last we spoke? Quite a bit going on at the Euros.
Yeah. Well, it feels in a way like the tournament proper has started, doesn't it? Because the group stage, while there was plenty I enjoyed about the group stage, it was quite difficult to go out, I think. And now it's very easy to go out, as the Netherlands found out last night.
That's true. What channel was I streaming? I can't remember. I think it was Tony DeRigo, who was the
Okay.
co-commentator on whatever channel this was. So he said in the opening couple of minutes of his commentary, it was something like, well, one of these teams is going to go out today. That's just the way it works with knockout football. It's going to be hard luck for one of them. I was thinking, thanks for explaining that to us so clearly, so early on. Just hadn't quite got that. It was quite funny, though. It was sort of go, and there's a man. He has 2 legs with which he walks. That's how it works.
Yeah. It is rather stating the obvious. But I think it has added some jeopardy to the games that was perhaps missing. I watched most of the football this weekend. I think I watched all the knockout games. I'm just reflecting on it now. So Saturday, Wales got absolutely battered by Denmark.
They really did, didn't they? They really did.
I'm an Aaron Ramsdale fan, as you know. I like him, and I wish the best for him. But they were well short against Denmark.
Yeah, they were poor, and Denmark were very good. They were very good.
Yes, in fairness, they were. I mean, was it Kasper Dolberg who came into their team and scored a couple of really, really nice goals? First goal in particular was brilliant, and they look good. And they, obviously they're the kind of neutrals' favourite, aren't they? Given everything that went on with Christian Eriksen. I mean, they've come from an unlikely scenario to win a European Championships before, so I guess write them off at your peril.
Yeah, that's true. And then Italy versus Austria in the evening.
Yeah, I thought Austria, in normal time, they looked dangerous, and they scored a goal that was ruled out for VAR. Arnautovic with the header, and I think if that had gone in,
I was quite torn by that decision, because from a purely footballing spectacle perspective, but it would have made that game really interesting had Austria gone ahead, had that goal stood. I mean, it was offside, I guess, by the letter of the law, and the other part of it was I did not want Arnautovic to be happy in any way.
It's conflicting, isn't it? Because Austria were theoretically the underdogs there, but so you sort of root for them a little bit, but then you look at Arnautovic and you're like, I'm not sure about this.
Yeah. I don't want him to be happy. My desire for him to be unhappy outweighed my desire to see whatever it might have been half an hour of Italy trying to break down an Austrian side who were, I thought, really impressive defensively. I thought they worked really, really hard. I'm not sure Italy's attacking quality is quite there. They seem a little bit average up front, but into extra time and they scored a couple of really good goals. Chiesa's goal was really lovely, wasn't it?
Yeah, nothing average about that one. I mean, what he does there is so difficult. I think he takes it basically on his face, and then the way he controls the ball by sort of stamping it into the ground. It's a really, really stunning goal, that one. So yeah, I made my peace with their progression thanks to the quality of their goals. And then we came to yesterday, which was the Czech Republic causing a bit of an upset, I think, by beating the Netherlands 2-0.
Yeah, I mean, I guess before the game it might have been an upset. 10-man Holland, though, it makes life very difficult for you. Any I'm not going to say complaints, but I mean, you can't really argue with a red card when you do that, can you?
No, the deliberate handball, wasn't it? I mean, no, I think it's kind of fair enough. I think it's kind of fair enough.
I've always had a soft spot for the Netherlands when it comes to international tournaments, just going back to the World Cup final in 1978 when I wanted Holland to beat Argentina and they didn't. And I've always had this kind of soft spot for them, but I didn't realise Ruud van Nistelrooy was part of the setup.
Yeah, do you know what? I found that surprising. There've been a few people sort of appearing on coaching staff.
Vialli.
Vialli for Italy. I was like, oh yeah. And he's got like a really strange job title. I was looking into it last night, and he's called it's not like he's delegation chief for the Italian national team. And apparently this is kind of a historic role that's always been there. And I think it's sort of like, basically he's just like around to like chat to people and help to stuff. It's just to sort of make use of his experience.
Right.
But yeah, interesting to see him turn up on the sidelines. Van Nistelrooy, of course, for Holland. So maybe a bit of the Arnautovic effect there. Yeah. Even if you had a soft spot for Holland, you couldn't quite commit to it.
Yeah, I know he played for Chelsea, and that's a black mark on anybody's career and character and everything else. But I always liked Vialli. I thought he was one of the good guys.
I think he is.
And he's had a difficult time of late, hasn't he? He's
had cancer, but I think he recently got the all clear. So,
right.
That's great news. But yeah, I mean, it's not a great Dutch side. in terms of, I think you mentioned about Italy's attack. I think the Dutch attack is not, you mentioned Van Nistelrooy, but obviously you think of Van Persie, you think of Van Basten, Kluivert. Yeah. They've had some incredible forwards, and I don't think, either Depay or former Arsenal man Donyell Marlon are quite at that level.
No. I did enjoy. Go on. I did enjoy the goalkeeper.
Stekelenburg.
Yeah, for the first goal. It was classic, oh shit, our goalkeeper hasn't turned up, let's put a centre-half in goalkeeping.
Yeah, there was a lot of that.
Having been that centre-half on more than one occasion, I can testify to this with some assurance. Yeah,
he sort of got caught, didn't he? He went to his back post, the ball got hit. He was nowhere, to be honest. Yeah. If he'd been wearing an orange kit, you would have just thought that's just another outfield player. His hands weren't even really raised, looking back at it now.
Yeah.
So that wasn't a great moment for him. And Patrick Schick got the second, I think, and he keeps scoring goals. Might be the top goal scorer in the competition, actually.
Yeah. I mean, what do you make of him? He seems like the classic. This guy is doing it at an international tournament. We should buy him kind of player. He's the standout guy so far in this Euros. Maybe with the guy that you were enjoying last night, Renato Sanchez. Two guys that people are going, oh yeah, we could have a bit of that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at his Bundesliga record last season. He scored 9 goals in 20 starts, which isn't terrible for Bayer Leverkusen. Roughly 1 in 2.
Starts or appearances?
Starts. He made 9 substitute appearances as well. Listen, he's having a good tournament. I would be lying if I said I had any idea what he was like across the course of a season. It's funny, isn't it? I mean, a tournament is a little run of 5 or 6 games, and sometimes a player can just hit a vein of form in that, and maybe playing for his international team is set up to suit him more. But you can't argue with the amount of goals he scored, nor in some instances the quality. I mean, obviously the one against Scotland is...
I loved the finish yesterday, though. It was a really nice goal, that one, but the finish, just the way he guided that with his left foot, was great. And maybe, this is his equivalent of, a Joe Willock at Newcastle loan spell. Who knows? Maybe. I mean, Bayer Leverkusen they're probably thinking this might be useful for us if someone needs a striker towards the end of the window. It is a nice finish at the near post, almost sort of Giroud-esque, the second one. He just kind of arrives and bends it into the near post. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to think of players who have emerged in tournaments that have gone on to prove worthwhile. I mean, the great example from an Arsenal perspective is Gilberto Silva, really, who certainly none of us knew about true.
Prior to 2002, and who I think Arsenal were aware of, but certainly accelerated their interest on the back of his performances in that competition, and turned out to be an invincible. On the other hand, you had Kleberson, who United went for, had been kind of similarly impressive around the international setup, and never really delivered against that. So it's always a risk when you see someone doing well in the tournament. I mean, I like the look of Renato Sanchez, who played for Portugal against Belgium. But I did read last night from somebody in France, and forgive me, I forget who, that Lille were looking for 75 million euros for him in January. And that price is unlikely to have dropped. So when I said on Twitter, I think he's my kind of tournament crush, a lot of people were like, yeah, why don't we buy him? And I guess that's your answer. Yeah,
I mean, I suppose the thing you would say is that, there are in the transfer market opportunities, things that happen outside, and I say this very loosely, assuming that such a thing exists at Arsenal, outside the plan and the strategy that you have put in place, right? So you've got your recruitment, your 1, 2, 3, 4s, whatever it might be for each position, right? And you're going, okay, right, we've targeted these guys, we've scouted them, we've got the background on them, we've done the due diligence on their character and things like that. But at a tournament, a player can sort of crop up and become an option where he wasn't one before.
Definitely. And I do think that's I wrote about that a couple of weeks ago, that a transfer window, it is a lot about planning and it is a lot about preparation, but it's also about improvisation, because sometimes the targets that you want, you can't get, or sometimes, as you say, a player comes onto the radar or comes onto the market that you weren't expecting. I mean, think of 2013, Mesut Ozil becoming available at the last minute in the window. It's not what Arsenal anticipated necessarily, but it was a good opportunity. And sometimes things come at you like that and you need to take them. But so, yeah, I hope that, I'm sure they are keeping a close eye on the tournament, but I do think that while prices are likely to be inflated off the back of it, sometimes you do catch, sight of a player who could be useful.
Yeah,
and what did you make of Belgium last night?
Not great.
Vermaelen played.
Thomas from Ireland. Yeah, I mean, they were okay, weren't they? They were a bit laboured, I think, without De Bruyne. And yeah, I was expecting a bit more from Belgium, to be honest, with with the likes of De Bruyne, Lukaku. I mean, Lukaku's goal scoring record is unreal. There's no two ways about it. But looking at him last night, you're just thinking, he has these games where he just looks so clumsy. And there was a lot of that to his game last night. The two Hazard boys, of course, were together. Great goal. I mean, I thought the goal that won it was a really good strike. I know it went right down the middle of the goal, but the swerve on it just completely wrong-footed the goalkeeper, didn't it?
Yeah, it was a good goal. He's probably looked the better of the Hazards in the tournament so far. I know, obviously, Eden Hazard's world-class player, absolutely, but he doesn't seem quite there to me.
He's having issues with his bum, apparently. I think it's not quite as inflated as it used to be, and that's according to Yaya Toure anyway. That's a bit of a problem.
He could go for implants, like Nicki Minaj or something. There is always that option. It's an increasingly popular cosmetic surgery. Something
to consider for either of us at some point. Yeah. If we want to get into the professional game, we could do that.
Well, we spend a lot of time sat down podcasting as well. So
yeah, that's true.
Additional cushioning is never an issue. But yeah, I mean, Portugal. I mean, Ronaldo was after his record, wasn't he? I think, and was he one goal away from being the highest international goal scorer ever?
It was quite funny the other day. Were we not talking last week about how we were impressed with some of his running for a counter-attack, wasn't it, for one of the goals?
Yeah, Germany. Yeah. The Germany game.
Yeah. And last night he was immobile. As immobile as Immobile. He was, just not moving. I don't know what was wrong with him. He just didn't seem to move very much in the game. They're quite, with all due respect to our Portuguese listeners, I think they just have an overabundance of players that are very easy to dislike.
Sure.
I
mean, as an Arsenal fan, you think of Ronaldo straight away. Bruno Fernandes.
Yeah.
No love lost there for sure. Pepe,
exactly. One of history's greatest monsters.
There are probably more.
I like that guy that tackled De Bruyne. I think his name is Palhinha.
Oh, yeah,
He just has the kind of face you'd never stop slapping with a wet fish. Yeah, exactly.
He really was.
Yeah,
and then I think, obviously, you've got to think Jose Mourinho's Portuguese. Do you know what I mean? There's a few red flags. I'm not trying to, any of our Portuguese listeners, I apologise, but I wasn't sorry to see the back of them in this tournament.
Right. So today we've got not England versus Germany, as I wrote about in the blog today. I got that completely wrong. So that's tomorrow.
Tomorrow, that is.
That is tomorrow. Today is Croatia versus Spain. No Ivan Perisic for Croatia. Spain found their goal-scoring touch in the last game. And France versus Switzerland, which could be quite interesting.
Yeah, I think Croatia-Spain is a close one. I think that's actually quite tricky to call. I think Croatia will give Spain some trouble. France-Switzerland, I mean,
Xhaka versus Pogba, the duel we've all been waiting for.
Exactly, yeah. Or Xhaka versus Kante. See a man literally run rings around him. Yeah, I mean, France obviously have huge talent in their squad, sort of comparable to Belgium. I haven't quite been convinced by it yet, even when they beat Portugal the other day. I'm not sure that the balance is quite right.
Yeah, it hasn't quite clicked, has it?
No. And sometimes in international football, it never really does. And it doesn't necessarily have to for them to win a tournament. You know, if they're tight at the back, solid through the middle of the team, they might nick it because they've got, really so much quality in that front three. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting now we're into the knockouts to see if they play with any more freedom and if that understanding between Griezmann, Benzema and Mbappe develops. I mean, Mbappe was the big sort of star of the tournament in theory coming into it, but he's not really caught light yet. I don't think he's got a goal yet in this competition. So he'll be desperate to make an impact.
That just make his price a bit more affordable for us,
Exactly.
Fair play to him.
I hear if he looks unhappy, it's because he wishes he was at Arsenal and he's trying to make that happen.
I heard that
it's sad for him, actually. He's being kept against his will.
Yeah, he's having a difficult time because he was apparently looking for houses in North London, but he hasn't been able to find any houses, and that's why he's also sad,
Can he not afford any of the houses in North London?
Probably. Could well be.
I know how he feels.
What are you expecting from England tomorrow?
Who knows? I mean, England-Germany is a fixture that has been quite a formative one for me. I remember Euro 96 is probably the first major tournament I really invested in and remembered. So, all those memories of Gascoigne's near miss and Southgate's penalty miss. I was in South Africa in 2010, I think it was, when Ozil took Gareth Barry apart and Frank Lampard scored the goal that was disallowed but it went over the line. I was there that day.
Never even went over the line. I don't.
So, I'm due a bit of luck. But if you look at the history of this fixture, if you go back further to, Italia 90, the Germans tend to do okay. But England are very fortunate. They're playing a lot of games in theory at Wembley Stadium. If they go all the way to the final, I think I'm right in saying they'll play 7 of 8 games at Wembley.
Right.
That seems an absurd advantage. And really, if they're ever going to progress deep into a competition, if you look at their half of the draw, this might be it. And as good as Germany have looked on occasions, I mean, they were very good against Portugal, somewhat less good against Hungary. I don't think this is a German side quite of the calibre of some of the previous ones we've seen.
I'd
Famous
agree.
last words.
No, I know what you're saying, but I do agree. I think, from what you've seen from Germany so far in this tournament, I don't think anybody should be overly worried about them. You know what I mean? So I guess it's whether or not England can... I mean, winning 1-0 is pretty effective, I guess, if you can keep doing it. But I just wonder if England can... I don't know. Handbrake on. It really feels handbrake on.
There was a great interview. Did you see... were you watching ITV last night when Mark Pugac, who is an Arsenal fan, I believe,
right,
said to Gareth Southgate, they had a live link-up. He said, Gareth, so what are we going to see from England in the next round? Do you think, in the words of Arsene Wenger, it's time to take the handbrake off? And Gareth Southgate was like, Sorry, what do you mean by that? He just had no sense of the expression.
Oh, come on. How could he not? I mean, that's ridiculous. How could he not know what that means, even if you'd never heard it before? If someone applied it to a football setting, you must know what it means.
I think there may have been a bit of evasion going on. I think he slightly bristles at the idea, Southgate, that that's what he needs to do because, from what we hear, the England setup are convinced that actually the key to tournament success is kind of being solid and not conceding goals.
I mean, there's some logic in that, in fairness, but,
Yeah, and in fairness, they haven't conceded a lot of big chances in this tournament and, they are pretty solid defensively. If they're going to produce stuff in attack and if they're going to be inspiring and exciting, obviously I'm really hoping Bukayo Saka retains his place.
Doesn't look like he will, though, does it? From what the chatter is, it seems like Mount is coming back and Foden will come back, which is, from an Arsenal perspective, a bit disappointing.
Yeah, I think that would be disappointing because I think you could go with one of Mount or Foden, to be honest. Or I think he can. Well, he won't, but he could play Mount as a kind of proper central midfield player and squeeze in an extra attacker. But I don't think he'll do that. That's for sure. I still hold out a little bit of hope for Bukayo, but I don't know. I mean, hopefully he'll be involved in some way. It's a massive fixture. I mean, I saw an interview with him saying it's probably the biggest game of his career to date. And as much as Arsenal fans, we might resist that idea in terms of eyes on him, that probably will be true.
Yeah, particularly as he sort of, I won't say came to prominence, because we know as Arsenal fans how good he is, but I think for the wider football world, who maybe haven't been paying too much attention to Arsenal because we finished 8th and who maybe aren't that inclined to watch Arsenal at the moment because we're not that entertaining anyway. If Arsenal are on the telly as a neutral, are you going to watch it? Because we don't score a lot of goals, so we're not that exciting to watch. You might just think, okay, he's the best player in a bad team, so what? That doesn't make him that great, but I think what he did the other night for England made a lot of people sit up and take notice. So I do see what you mean there, yeah.
What it is about Saka, I think, when he steps up to any level, when he came into the first team, when he comes into the international team, he just makes so few bad decisions. For a player so young, obviously he has some fantastic attributes. He's got skill, he's got power, he's got speed. But it's his decision-making, I think, that's most impressive. His composure, his courage with the ball, the way he looks forward all the time, the way he just makes the right decision time and time again. I think it's a very different type of thing, but you do see that in young players. Like Cesc had it as well, even at, maybe even more so, to be honest, even at like 17, he played in a way that a mature player would play. And I think Saka has a little of that. And whatever happens in this tournament for him, the fact that against the Czech Republic, he was being selected ahead of, people like Jadon Sancho, who's worth 100 million euros or whatever it might be. That's pretty incredible. And I think he has kind of made an impact on the wider public consciousness, for better and worse. Yeah.
Okay, let's do a few minutes of transfer talk before we get into questions in part 2. And you did a big piece in The Athletic this morning. James Maddison, not likely to happen because of the money that's involved. A few names that have cropped up in this particular one. Ben White's still ongoing. Lokonga still ongoing. Deals, I suppose, that we expect to get done. Are those the two that appear to be closest?
I think that's fair to say. I mean, certainly there's a lot of confidence from the people involved that agreements will be reached. I think it's, in the Ben White situation, it's kind of about what money gets paid when. And I think the figure is going to end up being around 50 million. With Lokonga, again, I think it's about bridging quite a small gap to Anderlecht. I think the player is pretty determined to join Arsenal. So I would say that I'm really confident on those two. Yeah.
There was a report this morning, I think it was in Sport Witness. It comes from one of the Belgian newspapers. They do good stuff at rounding up, all the stories that appear in local newspapers, but, in various international editions. And Lokonga is not expected to join up with Anderlecht for pre-season training. That was the story that was in whatever newspaper that was. So that might suggest that something is pretty close there.
Yeah, I don't think it's too far away. I think that it's something Arsenal are going to press on with in the next week or so, and hopefully they get to a resolution. I mean, it's such a big to-do list that I do think it's important to start, ticking one or two things off.
Okay, a left back from Real Madrid, Miguel Gutierrez. So what do you know about this one?
Yeah, I mean, the left back one, and I mentioned this in the piece, there's still a decision really to be made on what they're going to do about it. This player is a player who came to my attention as someone they have been watching and been in contact with. He broke from the sort of Castilla, Real Madrid B side into the first team last season. He's a left back who can also play in midfield. Some clubs, I think, quite like the idea of him as a central midfield player. So he's very technical, very skilled, full player. He played about half a dozen times for Madrid in La Liga last season, towards the end of the season. But his situation at Madrid is a little bit complicated because they have got two other left backs, Ferland Mendy, who I think had a pretty good season last season if he had a few injury problems. And then they've got Marcelo, I'm not sure what it is, who has 12 months to go on his deal. And a lot of people thought he'd be allowed to leave because he's into his 30s now and not quite the force he was. But Florentino Perez recently came out and said he's going to be Real Madrid captain next year. And you don't find a lot of left backs like this guy. So this young lad, whose name I've clean forgotten at this point. Is
Miguel Gutierrez.
Gutierrez, that's right. Has some interest from clubs, some permanently, some as a possible loan. He's got a €40 million release clause in his contract, but I don't think there's much realistic prospect of Arsenal paying that. I think that would be a hell of a lot of money to spend on a backup left back, but then they seem to be spending a hell of a lot of money, as I'm sure we'll come on to shortly. But yeah, it's an interesting one. I think, he obviously fits the profile. He's 19. They've done the Tierney contract, but I think part of protecting the asset that is Kieran Tierney is ensuring we have someone who can provide proper cover and proper competition. I saw another name on the left back today from Fabrizio Romano about a Portuguese left back. He tweeted it out last night that Arsenal are also following, also in touch with. Nuno Tavares is his name. Asking price around kind of 15 to 17 million euros. Again, I think he sounds like he's in the right kind of ballpark of the profile as well. I think someone who's about 19, 20 can come in, play some cup games, be an alternative to Tierney, develop under him, is probably what we should be doing with that position.
I think so, but it's also complicated because, how do you attract a player of sufficient quality when they look at, they'll see Kieran Tierney and understand that he is going to be the first choice left back at Arsenal. And having a competitive environment is, it's all well and good, but it's like being, if Arsenal want to sign you as a striker and they've got Thierry Henry and Dennis Bergkamp, you know what I mean? You know that realistically, the only time you're going to play is in maybe some cup games or if they're injured. So, it is a difficult one, I think. And then you question whether or not a player who is willing to come and just sit there behind someone like Kieran Tierney is the player that you want. So I recognise that we need Tierney cover, and it is something that we have to sort out one way or the other. But I genuinely think it's one of the more complicated signings that we have to sort out.
I think it is. I think Arsenal, from what I understand this summer, they're trying to pull together a group of players that they think can be part of the project, if you forgive the slightly wanky term, for like the next 5 or so years. I think they genuinely want to get people in who are kind of, around that kind of early 20s age, and that they think will be kind of good contributing squad members over that period. And I agree that there is a challenge there to convince someone that this is the right place for them and there's a clear route to the first team if they're coming in at left back. But I also think the sell that they'll make to players and that they have been making to players is much more about come and be part of this group.
Future,
there will be an egalitarian, exactly. There will be a kind of meritocratic selection. We need 20 good players. We want you to be part of that.
And if we make progress and we're in Europe next season, there's more football, etc., more room for rotation and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly, yeah. And in the case of someone like Gutierrez, I mean, yes, he would have Tierney in front of him at Arsenal, but like I say, at Madrid, he's got two guys there. So, but he may then say, well, I'll go somewhere I'm going to be immediate first choice. I can see that. I mean, one of the names that's sort of been thrown around by supporters certainly as a possibility is someone like Patrick Van Aanholt, right, who has been released from Crystal Palace and is free and he's about 30, and you could get him on a short-term deal, ask him, to stay in London, which he would probably quite like, having been at Chelsea and Palace previously. How would you weigh a kind of 20 million euro investment in a 19-year-old versus a 2-year deal for Patrick Van Aanholt?
Yeah, I guess it all comes down to how much you can spend, where you need to spend it. Like Van Aanholt would be profoundly meh, wouldn't it? I mean, as a signing, just like, we've done this. Even though, you can see logic to that kind of a signing.
It's a bit Cedric-y.
It's a bit Cedric-y. It was a bit Ryan Bertrandy, and, nobody's particularly into that kind of a deal anymore. But maybe there is something to be said for bringing in a young player, spending some money and letting them grow and develop and all that kind of stuff. I think people would be more into that kind of signing than the sort of sensible, easy option like a Van Aanholt or whatever,
Yeah, and I think everything I hear suggests that's what Arsenal would like to do. That they'd like to bring in a young guy who could be part of the future. Okay. We'll see. We'll see.
There was another guy mentioned, the wonderfully named Mert Mulder.
Yeah. Could he be beaming in? Or I think. Well, I actually watched this player sort of unwittingly play in the final Turkish group game against Switzerland, and he played as a left kind of wing back that day.
Okay,
but he's actually more of a right-sided defender. Very quick, plays for Sassuolo, who, from what I understand, are quite a good sort of analogue for the way Arsenal would like to play. They sort of play a lot of, quite attractive possession football. I know we don't always do that, but I think that's what we're aiming for. He's 22 odd. Had some good interest from teams like Atalanta, a couple of other Serie A teams that escape my mind just now. And he's an interesting one. I mean, right back again. Something I've written this morning, which I think is true, is that they kind of need someone to go. They've just got so many. I mean, Bellerin, Cedric, Chambers, and if you want to count Maitland-Niles, which I guess you have to, Maitland-Niles. And I think Arsenal are keen to avoid a situation like last summer where they end up with 30 people in the squad and could only register 25 or something. And that was a really destructive, negative thing, I think, quite early in the season. So, as much as it's as exciting to talk about the signings we might make, and this Turkish lad is someone that Arsenal have watched for a year and they do like him, they need to sell some players.
Yeah. I mean, there's talk of Inter Milan being interested in Hector Bellerin. That emerged over the weekend, but they want to take him on loan with perhaps an obligation to buy, and then they want to pay £20 a week for the next 500 years, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Are we as a football club or as fans of Arsenal, right, when we talk about the value of our players and we talk about the need to move players on, do you think we need to just readjust the expectations that we have in terms of the fees we might be able to get for certain players, that we think, okay, this guy's worth this much, but realistically, what money is out there? It feels to me like we are going to have to accept a lot of least worst deals, if you know what I mean. Like, none of them are particularly good, but this is the least worst one, and we have to get something done. So we're going to have to, accept the either a fee or a payment structure or whatever that isn't quite ideal. But it is the only way that we are going to be able to shift the amount of players that we need to shift or want to shift this summer.
I think that's right. And it's something I'm sort of wrestling with myself, because like every Arsenal fan, or like a lot of Arsenal fans, when I see the amounts being bandied around for some of our players, I go, Christ, that seems low,
Yeah.
But I am now thinking...
Yeah, sorry. I mean, it does seem low, but it looks like we're going to buy high as well. Do you know what I mean?
But I think that, so I think maybe I do have to adjust my expectations about what's realistic to get for our players, just based purely on what we're actually getting offered. The other thing to say about this is that I do wonder if Arsenal's problem is that it always feels quite obvious who we want to sell. And I do wonder how much that affects things. You know, we're paying a premium for Ben White, right? But Brighton, Ben White's not for sale. Like, he's not on the transfer list. They're not trying to get rid of Ben White.
Yeah.
They want to hold on to Ben White. And therefore, that puts them in a very strong negotiating position. And the same applies to a lot of the players Arsenal are presumably interested in. And I think that one of the issues we have is that I think partly because we have such a big squad, and it means some people are kind of pushed out or sent out on loan or not registered or barely getting a game. By the time the transfer window rolls around, everyone's like, right, well, obviously they want rid of him. Therefore, we're not going to go in and pay over the odds. And when you think about like teams that sell really well, I think the reason that they sell really well is that they sell maybe slightly before you're expecting.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you have a car boot sale and you're selling a lot of damaged goods, you know, and in inverted commas, damaged goods, you know what I mean? Or stuff that you don't want, you're not going to raise as much money as you might if you put out your fucking 52-inch, LCD TV, whatever it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I do think it's fair as well to look at kind of the technical staff in the club and how they manage that. You know, have they in some instances taken action that maybe has reduced the viability of someone on the transfer market by not using them or not involving them sufficiently? I think there may be some truth to that. But I just think generally, like if we were to sell, well, obviously we wouldn't and we shouldn't, but if we were to sell Bukayo Saka or Kieran Tierney, right, a player that we actually want and like, we'd be in a hell of a good negotiating position.
Of course.
We'd be fending off offers, probably above their market value. But the fact is, we're trying to sell a load of old shit that everyone knows we don't want. Isn't that right?
That is right. That is the position that we're in because of the way the squad has been built and managed over the last number of years. And there are all kinds of factors and all kinds of people that you can point fingers at. So there's no need to sort of go into the nuts and bolts of it. But that is the reality, is that we are dealing with many players whose contracts are iffy, or players who haven't quite made it, or players who, for one reason or another, everyone knows we no longer want. Therefore, how do you drive a hard bargain for that kind of a player? So I genuinely think that when it comes to selling players, we're going to have to bite the bullet. And I guess it'll be one of those situations whenever someone is sold, there'll be criticism of, well, that's too low. Look at what this guy went for. Look how much they got for him, etc., etc. But surely
I think we're going to have to let go of that.
Yeah, surely the important part is doing the business. Do you know what I mean? And then you build a squad whereby, if people want to come and buy your players, they're going to have to pay top dollar for them. You're not bloated with players that you don't want or aren't good enough or don't fit or whatever it is.
Or are in weak contractual positions. Yeah, all these things. I mean, the other thing is that practically, I think the way that transfers work affects the price that is paid. So how can I put it? If you've got a player that you want to sell and you say to that player, you're available to go and find yourself a club, then the conversations that are happening there are basically the player finds an agreement with a club, and then it's in everyone's interest for the fee the club pays to be as low as possible. Like, if I'm Joe Smith's agent and I'm told Joe Smith's for sale, and so I go and strike a deal with Bolton, right, or whoever it might be. At that point, I go back to Arsenal. I'm saying, well, I'm going to Bolton. You told me to find a club, and it's Bolton. And Bolton are like, we've only got £5 million. like you put yourself in a slightly tricky position.
I understand. Yeah.
And I think we're seeing that a bit with Granit Xhaka, in that he seems to be of the mind. There were some quotes coming out from over the weekend about the beauty of the city of Rome and all that. He seems to be of a mind to join Roma. And when you know you've got the player, then
why do you
don't have to go crazy with the bid, because you kind of have the feeling that sooner or later you'll get your man, because this player's got effect. I mean, technically it's illegal, but effectively got an agreement with the club already. And in some instances with Arsenal, they're very happy for that to be the case. Someone like Matteo Guendouzi, it's very clear the door is closed for him. So if he's like, well, I've got myself a deal with Marseille aren't going to batter the door down with a £30 million bid, because they feel they've got the player. And it works both ways. I mean, it probably explains why Arsenal aren't, rushing to Anderlecht with loads of money for Lokonga, because they feel they've got the player. But I just think when you put people on the outskirts of your squad, and when it's sort of their responsibility or their prerogative almost to find a destination, then once they've found that destination, it's not incumbent on the buying club to go way above the odds.
Yeah. I mean, that is the reality of the transfer market and how it's going to work for a lot of players that Arsenal want to get rid of,
Yeah,
because
so somehow we need to to avoid this happening, I think there are several things we need. We probably need a leaner squad. Mm-hmm. We probably need a squad that's more, I don't know, equitable maybe, that has a bit more balance across it, so that everyone has a kind of value. And then we probably need to sell players. And I know this is a drum Elliot Smith has banged many times on Arsenal Vision podcast, but we probably need to sell players sooner, at a point when it's uncomfortable. That's how you extract real value, unfortunately.
Look, that is what Mikel Arteta and Edu and Dickie Garlick are going to have to deal with this summer. That is the reality of our situation. There's no escaping it. Until such time as you can build a squad which is better and more robust and, I guess, in some ways valuable, you know what I mean, in terms of where they are in the transfer market. Ideally, you want a squad of 20-odd players that you do not want to let go. But that's not the situation that Arsenal are in. We're trying to reshape a squad. We basically paid players to go away. It was so bad last January. You know what I mean? This is what we're having to do. So this is why there's an extra element to this whole rebuild thing. The football side of it, and how the business we do this summer influences what we do on the pitch is key. Of course it is, but also, we have to put ourselves in a position where we have some strength in negotiation when it comes to players. And I guess it comes down to quality of players as much as anything. Yeah. Good players will always be valuable, and good players will always be coveted. Yeah,
these are, in most cases that we're trying to sell, fringe players in an underachieving team. And I guess the market is never quite going to be there, in quite the same way for those guys. If we just finished third, I think it would maybe be slightly different. There'd be a bit of cachet attached to some of these guys.
Of course.
But there just isn't. And I think while we can talk about this in the long term as something that needs to be fixed, I think it's still, maybe we will have to kind of cut our losses a bit this summer. It just feels like that, doesn't it? I mean, there haven't really been bids that are close to acceptable for the vast majority of the players Arsenal want to sell this summer, and that is a problem.
Yeah, you need people to be interested. That's also part of it as well. So, okay, well, look, it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out, and what we generate in terms of income from players that we sell will be useful, of course. But I do think perhaps we need to readjust quite how much we might bring in. Okay, let's leave it there for now. We're going to do questions and more in part 2, which is coming up right after this. Welcome back to the Arsecast Extra. This is part 2 where we answer questions that you send to us on Twitter at Gunnerblog and at Arseblog, and also on the, what's it called? Discord chat server, which you get access to if you're an Arseblog member on Patreon. Okay, I think I want to go first, if that's all right. I should have been prepared to get the question.
If you want to go first, Andrew, you've got to be ready.
Yeah, I know. Okay, let me see. I do have it here. Okay, it comes from, I think maybe we had a couple on this one, but this one definitely comes from, this is terrible, isn't it? Okay, it comes from James R, who's at James RR04, who says, please try to convince me that Ramsdale wouldn't be anything less than a poor signing, and Joseph Parastatidis, I think is how you say it. He's at Joe_Paras, says, what does it say that I'm more excited at the prospect of signing a keeper who can't play until the end of the year than Ramsdale?
Yeah, I think on the face of it, it does feel a curious one. It is absolutely true that Arsenal want to buy Aaron Ramsdale, and they have commenced talks with Sheffield United about that. I don't think, if you really don't want Arsenal to buy Aaron Ramsdale, I think there is hope for you in that Sheffield United value him enormously, and they have, I think, Saudi Arabian owners who, are not keen to lose him. So I don't think it's by any stretch a given that he will sign. I think that I do understand absolutely why people are kind of up in arms about it. I do think he's a little bit harshly judged, Aaron Ramsdale, because he went into Sheffield United last year. They'd had Dean Henderson on loan from Man U, and they'd had a really good defence the previous year, didn't concede many goals, and everyone put all the Sheffield United defenders in their fantasy teams. And then in the first few months of the season, they conceded lots of goals. Yeah. And I think he actually did struggle in that period. From what I saw, I think he had a sort of a bad spell. But whenever you're interested in a player, I do always think it's worth talking to the fans of that club, because at the end of the season, he was voted player of the season by those fans, which, given the start he had, I think shows how well he did in the second half of the season, albeit in a very specific job for a relegation fighting team.
Is it just because he was like the busiest, though, because they were so terrible and he was having to do a lot?
I think obviously that helps. Like, goalies look good, don't they? In bad teams sometimes. He was also player of the season the previous year at Bournemouth. I think, the reason that people, if it was £5 million, I think everyone would go, oh, that's sort of fine, because I think if you think about it, you've got to have 3 goalkeepers in your squad, and you're only allowed 17 non-homegrown players. So it does seem, I think, crazy to have, 3 foreign goalkeepers out of your 17. That seems like a bad allocation of resource. So you do need a homegrown, well, you don't need a homegrown goalkeeper, but I think I can understand why Arsenal want to do it. They obviously wanted to do David Raya. They bid like a lot of times for David Raya last summer, a lot of times, and it didn't happen. He then got promoted, which meant his relegation release clause was release clause was invalid, and so now they've turned to Ramsdale, and he will be expensive if he comes. He'll be more than £20 million for sure, and it's because he's English, basically.
But I mean, is that not Arsenal spending £20 million on a backup goalkeeper, or do they see him as a potential number one? I mean, there's another aspect to this.
Yeah, I mean, so this is I'm now talking about kind of my opinion, but I don't think Bernd Leno will be at Arsenal in 12 months, or in 14 months, shall we say.
Right, I agree with that.
I think Bernd Leno, there are no talks about a new contract. Something's not quite right, I think, in the relationship there. I don't think the degree of trust in him is what it was. And I'm not sure how, I think he probably feels similarly. I think he's not in a hurry to sign a new deal. So I think in 12 months' time, Arsenal will have 2 new goalkeepers. I really firmly believe that. And I think Arsenal see Ramsdale as being one of those 2. And I think that they want it to be competitive. I think that it seems crazy, right? Having sold Emi Martinez and, brought in Runarsson and then Matt Ryan. But I think they seem to have decided that they want a model more akin to what United have and Chelsea have, where they have 2 goalkeepers they trust. So when you say, do they see him as a first team player? I think they must. You don't spend £20 million on someone who you don't think is capable of that.
So
what are crazy.
What are they seeing that basically nobody else is then?
Well, I suppose what I think is that a lot of the Ramsdale thing is perception. Like, it's not true that no one else has been interested in him. Tottenham tried quite hard to buy him last summer. I just think he's really suffered perception. But he's in the England squad. I mean, he's not a joke. I do think it's a curious one where, I don't know. I think he's probably not worth £25 million because he's English. He's probably got an extra 10 million on his price tag.
Yeah.
But ultimately, Arsenal were going to pay 15 million or more for David Raya, who's never played a Premier League game. And in Ramsdale, they get a guy who's got a 10-year career ahead of him, who's played 2 full Premier League seasons. Like, if Bernd Leno does get injured in the first half of next season, you've got a guy coming in who's played 60 Premier League games. I think that's useful.
Do you think... I mean, you said it, if it was 5 million, nobody would care. Really. Or, I mean, they might think, okay, we could have found a better goalkeeper. But, for 5 million, it's not really a big issue. The price tag is. And obviously, it's a lot of money to spend on a player who's going to probably sit on the bench for most of the season behind Bernd Leno, assuming Bernd Leno is going to be here next season. And, Arsenal spending 25 million on a goalkeeper... or £20 million on a goalkeeper this summer might suggest that there could be something happening there. But do we worry too much about what we're spending? Do you think? Or,
I mean, to be honest, Arsenal's interest in Ramsdale is the main thing that makes me think there must be money. I mean...
But where do you stand on that? Like, okay, should we be so concerned with how much money Arsenal spend? I don't want to say we have an obsession with value. I don't mean it like that. But I think we have or do look at every deal to the nth degree and think, okay, is this good value? Is this the best way we can allocate resources? Like, if we spend 20 million on Ramsdale, but we also go out and spend 50 million on centre half, 50 million on an attacking midfielder, 20 million on a central midfielder, maybe another 20 odd million on another central midfielder, it becomes part of a bigger splurge, if you like. Is that something we should be concerned about? Or if you're looking for the club to spend some fucking money, they're spending some fucking money. Is that not okay? I mean, the question, the other side of that is like, it's not free money. It does have to be repaid somewhere. So, it is.
It's not our money either, I guess.
No, true. Yeah.
It's sort of, I mean, listen, there are some fans who will be really concerned about where this money is coming from. Is it a loan? I mean, the answer is almost certainly yes. It's not magic. What are the terms of that loan? To be fair, probably not that punishing given what borrowing is like at the moment. But yeah, there'll be some people who'll be worried about the accumulated debt. I think, it's a really, really, really fascinating one. I mean, I don't think Arsenal are buying Ramsdale at 20, whatever it is, 2025, thinking we're going to sell him for 50 and get a huge profit. I think that's quite unlikely. I think probably what they're thinking is, we've got a problem at number 2 goalkeeper. We have not been able to fix that. This is a guy who could, at worst, do that job for 10 years. And I think when you think about it in those terms, it's like, well, you know, every penny we spent on Runarsson was a complete bust. Like, it was not a lot of pennies, but it was a complete bust. If you've got someone who can actually contribute as a squad member for a prolonged period of time, then you probably will reflect on that as worthwhile.
Yeah.
But I do see the argument. I mean, like, you know, the other way to do it is to go the kind of Richard Wright, you know, model. And I don't mean when Arsenal bought him for 6 million. I mean for Man City picking him up when he's like 38 on a free because he's homegrown and he's experienced. And that's the other thing Arsenal could do. I mean, if you're looking for a homegrown goalkeeper, the list isn't long, and you sort of have a choice. Do you go for someone who's in their 30s, on the way down, kind of tried and tested? Or do you go for someone who is young, hungry, wants to be a part of the future? And it feels like Arsenal have made the latter decision.
Yeah.
And people can debate that. I mean, if it was my money, I'd probably go with the experienced option in that case. I think that's a smart thing to do for your backup goalie. Get in an old guy who's a safe pair of hands, if you pardon the pun. But I feel like there's sort of almost been like a kind of cultural decision of like, that's not what we want to do this summer. Hence, you know, not pursuing Ryan Bertrand and things like that. But what do you think?
I think it's a lot of money on a very underwhelming player who I recognise is still only, 23, something like that. So he's got plenty of time to develop and improve. Goalkeepers, as we know, tend to be at their best in their sort of as they mature. But I can't help feel that this one is just... I just wonder what that 25 million might do elsewhere this summer. And I don't mean to say that because we're spending that 25 million, we're not going to do some of the other stuff that we need to do or what have you. I don't quite understand it. That's all. As a if it's a backup goalkeeper, it's a huge amount of money. It's basically more than you spent on Bernd Leno, who was brought in to be your number one. So I'm a little puzzled as to what the plan is. If they're buying Aaron Ramsdale to be the number one, I think it's a huge leap of faith, a massive gamble on a player who, you know, hasn't been that convincing. So I do know kind of like a couple of the things they like about him, which I guess people will be looking for. What is the silver lining here? Yeah.
What I think one of the things they like about him is that he comes off his line. He comes off his line to close people down. He comes off his line to take crosses. And there's a feeling that Leno doesn't do that enough. And that whatever goalkeepers they have in the future, they want that to be a part of their game. And I think they also think he is better with his feet than Leno, which is probably accurate. He's all right with his feet. He's pretty good. But I agree. It's a lot of money. I think it's very, what's the word? A huge leap of faith is absolutely right. I mean, that, you know, ultimately they're seeing potential in a player that we as fans, or collectively as fans, based on, you know, certainly my social media timelines, don't see. And so that's on them. And I think in a way it's kind of like a, you know, you could say the same of Ben White. I mean, Ben White is obviously a quality player. I think there's less debate about that. But it's still a big allocation of resource to an area that fans aren't convinced it should be allocated to, you know? And it's a big statement from the manager and from the technical director. So we'll have to see. I mean, like I said at the top, I'm a little bit dubious about if this one happens, just because I think Sheffield United might dig their heels in, and if so, Arsenal may be forced to turn elsewhere, and maybe some people won't consider that the worst thing. Time will tell. He's with England at the moment, so as with White, there's kind of not huge time pressure to do it. I kind of feel like the likelihood is these things get finally sorted maybe once the tournament or once England's participation is over.
Okay. Can I ask another one? Because I've got one that's slightly in line with something you just said there, and it comes from Keown's best mate on the Discord, and he says, good morning. Is the resale model many of us think Arsenal should get back to, where we sign young players, they play well for a few years, and we sell them for a huge profit, viable for Arsenal in a world where only our English rivals have the money to buy big players off us? Could the Ben White... I
think that's a brilliant question.
Yeah. And he says then, could the Ben White signing be a sign of the club recognising this, looking for value through length of service rather than sell on?
Well, I would argue the Ben White signing potentially offers you both. I mean, if Ben White is brilliant for Arsenal for 3 years, then maybe Manchester City do come knocking, you know, but with a crazy sum of money. I mean, it is a problem. Who can we sell to? Like, if we develop a player in Europe, on the continent, how many clubs are there that can give us the money that we would deem right?
Yeah, it's true. PSG,
the Spanish clubs.
Well, they used to be.
Madrid,
Barca, depending on what they do with the sort of debts that they've accrued over the last number of years and their desperation to be in the Super League, tells you that, you know, they've got financial problems. So it's no longer a case that Barcelona are going to come along and pay you, you know, 15, 20 million pounds for Alex Song, for example. You know, that's not going to happen anymore, which is a shame because we fleeced those fuckers for all kinds of
money. We did well out of that. but
yeah,
it's a really good point. Like, who can we sell players to? And the answer is probably like Man U, Chelsea, Man City.
Yeah. Aston Villa.
Aston Villa, of course, yeah. But I think there's something to that. I mean, ultimately, as much as English players are overpriced, and they definitely are, they do offer two things. One is longevity of service often, as alluded to in the question. The other is that they pretty much retain that premium if you sell them to another English club.
Yeah.
Because homegrown players are so desirable. And because I think English clubs ultimately like having English players, you know, they want that kind of core, I think, sometimes. And I think we might be seeing a bit of that happening at Arsenal too. If you think about Chambers, British players, we say Chambers, Holding, Tierney, you know, they want to add White, they want to add Ramsdale, they've got Saka and Smith Rowe.
Yeah.
I think Arteta, you know, or Edu, somebody seemingly seems to think that's a good idea. But also those players, they do retain value. I mean, listen, we all know I overestimated Eddie Nketiah's transfer value, but he will still go for more than he would if he were not English. So yeah, I do think that feels part of the strategy too, to bring in players who do offer those two things, longevity, but also who retain that kind of premium on their services potentially. I mean, if Ben White explodes and does really well, you know, he's worth silly money because he's English.
Yeah.
And if I'm dubious about whether this would happen, but if Aaron Ramsdale gets a run in the Arsenal team and impresses, he's probably worth more. As mad as that may seem, because Jordan Pickford, who'd had one good season at Sunderland, went for 35 million or whatever it was. Yeah. And so this is the crazy world of English players in the transfer market. But I know people will feel like, oh, Arsenal shouldn't be playing that game. We should be playing the Leicester game. And I think there is a lot to that. I feel a bit like that too. But on the other hand, I can see that certainly someone like White represents a kind of stable investment in a way. I mean, he's 20. I mean, I saw another thing, by the way, I touched on in my piece today, was I've had a lot of fans sort of saying, you know, Varane's going to go for less than White. But Varane's going to earn 3 times
at
what
least.
Ben White earns.
At
least. I mean, the figures in the Spanish press are saying 400k a week.
Yeah.
And I do think that as much as the transfer fee for Ben White looks huge, his salary, in terms of like the uptake it would take from where he was at Brighton, Arsenal can double his money and he'll be on a modest salary in Big Six terms. And, you know, you sign him on a 5-year deal, the difference in the investment, you know, the total cost of that player over 5 years is huge. You know, we're talking tens and tens of millions.
I don't think any Arsenal fan can get upset about not signing Varane, because there's literally no way that Varane would sign for us anyway. At the moment, you know what I mean?
And so, for example, you know, I think a lot of people's objection to Ramsdale is going to be, well, what about Andre Onana, who, you know, seemingly is available at a knockdown price? But I would say, and anyone who listens to the show regularly will know, I've always been kind of lukewarm on that story. And part of the reason is that while there are certainly people close to Onana who say, yeah, Arsenal is one of his options, there are other people very connected to the situation, very well informed, who say, why would he go to Arsenal? He's going to have Barcelona, Madrid, Inter Milan, Europe's biggest, best teams after him, especially if he waits till he's a free transfer and the ban is over. And I have to say, I take no pleasure in saying this because I'm an Arsenal fan, as you know. I love Arsenal. But this transfer window, more than any other transfer window in my time covering the club, I've heard about players who've had a whiff of interest from Arsenal and said, why would I go there? And it's the first time, genuinely, that I've really encountered that. And I think that's something we have to
reckon with.
Swallow as well. And a lot of it is like, well, they don't have European football. A lot of it is that. And they don't have, which obviously Champions League was bad enough in itself, but no European football at all. But, you know, if you're faced with joining one of England's top 4 teams or Arsenal, it's not really... I mean, we are not the most attractive option top players have this summer. That's just the reality. And don't get me wrong, we are still attractive. We're in London, we're in Premier League, we pay very well. Mikel Arteta, whatever people may think, has a very good reputation in football, and people are excited to work with him. We saw Kieran Tierney's comments in the week about working with him and how much he enjoys it. I think a lot of players have that impression too. But our standing in football is not what it was. You know, PSG, for example, right? They've just bought that boy, or they're about to buy that boy, Hakimi. Brilliant right back, come from Inter. This probably opened the door maybe for Bellerin. That's a player Arsenal really, really liked for a long time. Watched, followed, were interested in. But when he came to move this summer, we weren't a realistic destination. And, I mean, of course, going up against PSG is always difficult. And I'm not saying Arsenal pursued it with any aggression. They didn't really, because there wasn't really a deal to be done. And there are other players like that who I think aspirationally we would have thought, oh yeah, he'd be good. But it's just not realistic.
Yeah.
And I hate saying it. And it's, you know, when we had Wenger, well, I guess we always had the Champions League. If you moved to Arsenal, it's like guaranteed Champions League football. We also had the huge pulling power of that particular manager. But this summer, we don't have that to the same extent.
No.
And so if we are going for guys who feel a little bit underwhelming, a little bit earlier in their careers, who want to take the next step, but, you know, maybe haven't got the interest right at the very top of the game, I think that probably reflects where we are.
I couldn't agree more. Really couldn't. We are. What's that great tweet? We're reaping what we've sowed. You know what I mean? But there's that great tweet, isn't there? Me reaping, ha ha ha, this is great. Sowing. What the fuck? Or no, sowing on the reaping thing. Anyway.
Yeah. You know, it catches up with you eventually.
Yeah.
You can only kind of rest on your laurels so long. And Arsenal are kind of at the start of a project here now. And, you know, they're trying to buy people who they think want to be and can be part of that project for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
In a way, I prefer it certainly to getting someone who's on the way down. You know, we've done too much of that.
Yeah, that's
for sure.
That is for sure. Okay, I think it's your question.
Yeah. Let me have a look. I've got a question here, but I want to answer it, but I will.
Well,
I like this, by the way.
Ask it.
Proud Gooner, by the way, said, now that Bukayo Saka is the new... Bukayo Saka is the New England golden boy. Can we expect multiple penalties and preferential treatment from English refs next season?
Yeah, I like that one too, yeah. I hope, fingers crossed.
What about this from Klaus Faust? Does Ben White's ability to play right back and defensive midfield change how you view the needs in those positions?
Is this the one that you wanted to answer, or is that a different one?
No. This is... I don't care about this question.
Well, I mean, I could be wrong, but it feels like they're buying Ben White to be a centre half, not to be a defensive midfielder or a right back.
For sure, I think so. Yeah, I think so.
I do wonder if there is some margin for versatility next season. When we think about how the squad is constructed, if we do want a leaner squad, will versatility be a valuable asset for certain players, in the sense that, like, if you have to, could you play Ben White in midfield, or could you play him at right back in certain games? I guess you don't want to, in the sense that, like, I think one of the interesting things for me about the rebuild is quite what we're going to do at centre half and in defence in general, because I feel like as a club we haven't had the kind of consistency across a back four that you would ideally like to have. You know what I mean? Like, we don't have a central defensive partnership, that's established. And I really think that is something that you need. I know the modern game is different and players come in and out, but in certain areas of the pitch, if you have a consistency there, it's really beneficial. If you're talking about Thomas
City squad, but they had Diaz and Stones.
Yeah, if you're talking about, like, we need to get a partner for Thomas Partey, which I think is a good idea, somebody who can play alongside him consistently, I think that's great. But that should also apply to centre half. So I do think that if Ben White comes in, he will play centre half, and that is the reality. So I don't think it changes what I think we need to do in other positions. Still think we need those signings. Yeah.
I do wonder as well. Well, I mean, people get in a real twist over, like, back three, back four, and then ultimately when Arsenal actually play, the shapes aren't that different. They build up with two or three at the back. I just think it's interesting. The Euros is quite a sort of three at the back tournament. There's a lot of that system around at the moment, and a lot of people making use of it. I wonder if... I don't think it'll be like the de facto formation for Arsenal next season, but I think it... I wonder if we might see it here and there. Just a sort of feeling. Like Ben White, is very comfortable in that role, and I think it might be an option. But who knows?
Let me ask you this one. And then you can, in the meantime, send me the question that you want to answer, and I'll ask it as if it's just cropped up, and I'll go, oh, is that the question? Anyway, Niall O'Connor on the Discord says, surely Martinelli missing the Olympics will be good for us, but what do you make of Saliba and Gabriel both potentially going good or bad? And then to sort of widen that out, we have another one here from, let me see, I should get my fucking glasses on, Gavrilo Bianchi, who says, what are your thoughts on Saliba's international duty at the Olympics? Seems like a lose-lose situation for him. His best chance to make it in the team is to impress during pre-season, but at the same time, I can't imagine passing up a chance to play internationally. Is another loan the unavoidable outcome? And I think one of the things that we've overlooked, perhaps, is the presence of Gabriel at the Olympics, meaning that he potentially could miss the start of the season. It depends on what kind of fitness regime and physical regime, he is being given this summer, because I think it's no longer a case that players go away out of sight, out of mind, and then they come back. I think there's much more ongoing communication, isn't there, between players and fitness coaches and that kind of stuff. So if he is away with the Brazil team for the Olympics, it's not like he's going to be unfit coming back to Arsenal. He could come back and just sort of slot in, I guess.
Yeah, I think for Saliba, I'm tempted to say it's a bit of a disaster for him. But then ultimately, I'm not sure how much it really would have mattered. I think Ben White coming in is probably indicative of what will happen with Saliba. And I'm not sure a couple of weeks at London Colney would have substantially changed that. And I'm not sure he is the type to hang around for that decision anyway. I wouldn't be that surprised if something gets agreed in advance for him to go on loan.
Saliba, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think it augurs well for him. I mean, it's one of those where, like, I don't think any footballer really dreams of going to play at the Olympics. I don't think that's the be-all and end-all when you're becoming a professional footballer. But I can understand why, if he were called up, he would want to go. Arsenal haven't stood in the way of Gabriel, who you would argue is a more important first-team fixture than William Saliba, right? So they haven't stood in his way, even though they could. They could easily say, no, Gabriel, you're not being released for the Olympics. So it depends how you look at it. Like, are Arsenal letting Saliba go because they don't view him as an important player? And that may well be the case, but the same applies to Gabriel. They're not going to tell him no. Could Saliba say, no, I don't want to go because I want to fight for my place at Arsenal? But if he's been given no encouragement that he's going to be given a chance at Arsenal, why wouldn't he go and play in the Olympics? So it's a weird situation, I think.
It is an odd one. I think it's good that Martinelli's not going, I think. We want him around, we want him part of stuff. Yeah, when I saw Saliba being called up, I just sort of thought, that's that for him for this season at Arsenal. And I do mean that for this season. I don't think it's kind of completely irrevocable. I do think he's young enough. I mean, we kind of forget how young he is, like how much career he has ahead of him. But yeah, equally, how much he'll want to spend that with Arsenal after everything that's gone on, I don't know.
Where would you like to see him go on loan if he does go on loan again?
I'd love to see him in the Premier League.
Yeah,
I really would. There's been some suggestion Newcastle are interested. They did a lovely job with Joe Willock. I would love to see him in the Premier League. Why not? Then we'll get a proper look at him. It's probably the best thing for his transfer value as well.
Yeah, I think so.
Speaking of transfers, a breaking news story. I don't know if you've seen in the last couple of minutes. Arsenal have rejected a second Aston Villa offer for Emil Smith-Rowe.
Why are they coming back?
With a proposal of around £30 million.
Why are they coming back? Well, obviously, they're going to sell Grealish. That seems...
Yes, and that makes some sense of the aggression with which they pursued Buendia and now Smith-Rowe, right?
Yeah, it does. But, again, Arsenal have to get this sorted out with Smith-Rowe. If he's not for sale at 30 million, I get it. But maybe he's for sale at 40 million or 40. This goes back to what we were talking about earlier. I'm not saying I want that to happen, by the way. I think we should resist all bids and we should sign him to a new contract ASAP. But there's obviously enough encouragement for Villa to come back. Our no wasn't no enough. Yeah, tell me something, please.
I'm honestly, and people are going to gasp and say famous last words, I'm honestly not that worried about this one. Because it's so beneficial to Emil Smith-Rowe for this to be going on. If I'm that agent, I'm encouraging it too.
You're loving it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're in talks at the moment, kind of loose talks about a new contract. And obviously, I think this is accelerating that process. But, if I'm able to walk in and say, I've got £100 a week on the table here from Villa, then wow, that makes my job a lot easier. And I really believe that Arsenal know they can't sell Emile Smith-Rowe, because if they haven't got Martin Odegaard and they haven't got Emi Buendia and James Maddison is, I think, not really serious interest at the moment. Emile Smith-Rowe is one of the most important players in the squad.
Yeah.
Because, and so he's going to want to be rewarded with a salary that reflects that. Arsenal are going to say, you're a young player, we want to, invest in you, but, you're not at kind of star level yet. So it's a negotiation, and I think Arsenal will refuse to sell Smith-Rowe, and I think Smith-Rowe and his family will probably want him to stay with Arsenal. I do actually believe that. Yeah. Maybe I'm naive, given what we said about the pulling power of the club. I mean, here's a question. Is there an amount Villa could hit that would change your mind?
I mean, every player has a price, but I just think, for me,
they're going to get 100 million quid for Grealish.
Yeah, but I think what it would say. Do you remember when in that infamous summer of 2011, when Arsene Wenger said of Samir Nasri and Cesc Fabregas, "How can you say you're a big club if you sell your best players?" I'm paraphrasing. I can't remember the exact quote.
Yeah.
What would it say about Arsenal if, regardless of the amount of money that was on offer from Villa, and regardless of how you could say, well, we can take that money and we can reinvest it, what does it say about you as a club?
Ramsdale for that money, Andrew. Think about it.
You could get 3 Ramsdales, maybe.
Think before you speak.
What does it say about you as a club, the stature that you're trying to rebuild, if you're selling one of the brightest talents to come out of your academy in years to, with all due respect, Aston Villa, not Man City, not Man United, not Chelsea.
I actually agree. Listen, I'm normally the guy who's like, if the money gets crazy, you've got to sell. And I think that is if someone's like, here's 60 million quid for Emile Smith-Rowe.
If it's someone, yes. Aston Villa, no.
Yeah,
I don't know how you can rebuild your reputation.
To Man City.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
Like if Man City came in tomorrow and offered £75 million for Emile Smith-Rowe, how can you turn it down? Really, how can you? You're not competing with Man City. I know what you mean, though.
Like this summer, to this club, it would feel like
wave the white flag
in the face.
Wave the white flag. It
is. I use the word, I think, about it, unpalatable. I think that's right. I think Arsenal can't sell Emile Smith-Rowe to Aston Villa.
No.
And that's partly why I feel confident. I just think they can't do it. Even if they would like to.
You can't do it.
I think they must know they can't.
Yeah, they can't.
Even if it gets to the point where Arteta and Edu are like, we could really do something with this. I just think they can't.
No, pitchforks at the ready if that were to happen, Just what I would say about the club itself. And like I said, no matter how you tried to justify it, no matter what you said you could do with that money, it would just say too much about the way you run. So I can't see it. Okay, here's a question. It comes from Stephen Allen, who's at Gunner_9798. And he says, or asks rather, why do transfers take so long? If we really mean business, why can't we just pay the asking price and get everyone ready for the title challenge next year? A beautifully optimistic finale to that question.
So I have a sort of answer to this, I think, that's quite interesting, which is why I've forced you to ask me. Previous iterations of Arsenal, the people doing the deals had a degree of freedom and flexibility. So Dick Law, your friend of mine, used to be able to... He was given parameters, basically, within which to negotiate. And the trust from the chief executive and the board to him to do that, and Arsene, was implicit. I think, given that he was the head of football and a very high executive level, Raul Sanllehi had a degree of that freedom too. The guy doing the talking now is Richard Garlick. principally. He is the person who rings up a club, rings up his opposite number, be that a technical director or chief executive, and says, let's talk, and who submits an offer and who receives the feedback. But between every stage of that, between every offer he puts out, between every salary offer he puts together, he has to go back to the board and feed that back and get an approved bid.
So there's more, if you want to call it red tape / bureaucracy, or another way of putting it might be oversight.
Yeah, there is. And it does make things a bit slower. But we wanted it, didn't we?
Well, that's, I mean...
And I think, there's loads of reasons that could be. I mean, Richard Garlick's brand new. So it's probably inevitable that there's like a degree of, well, do keep us in the loop about what you're doing. But, the Arsenal board or the Arsenal hierarchy, let's say, I don't know if every board member happens to be there, are convening a couple of times a week, at least.
The WhatsApp group, James, the WhatsApp group.
The WhatsApp group, yeah, sure. I'm sure they've got Zoom and stuff to, say, all right, well, our bid for Ben White's been rejected. We want to put this one in. And listen, it makes things slightly protracted, but at least it means there's an element of kind of control. And personally, I think that's a good thing.
Okay.
That's not the only reason transfers take a long time. The other reason is it's negotiation. You don't want to seem too interested because then people think you'll just pay any money. There's not necessarily a rush. People feel like the window is long. I think that's a slightly misguided belief. But, there are lots of reasons. But I happen to know that in Arsenal's case this summer, they are having to sort of get these things approved. And I think given everything that's gone on, it's probably good.
Okay. Here's another question. It comes from...
Thanks for asking that question.
Yeah, no problem.
Great choice.
Good answer. Feckin' hell.
I actually need to go quite soon. So
let's... okay.
Let's make this near the end.
Okay. No, I think we've been going long enough. So here's one final question to do it.
Go on.
Feckin' hell on the Discord says, good morning, lads. Between five-a-side with his mates and backflips into the pool, watching Aubameyang on holidays is nerve-wracking, but he does seem to have got his sense of joy back. Do you think this is what was missing last season, and will we see a 20-plus goal season from him next year?
I hope so. I'm interested by all this summer stuff. I mean, everyone's working hard this summer if they're not at a tournament, it seems. But...
Yeah, like on my Instagram yesterday, I've seen Aubameyang doing his stuff. I've seen Reece Nelson and Joe Willock basically with gigantic rubber bands around them on holidays in Mykonos doing their running and what have you. I saw El Neni jumping up and down on a squishy ball type thing. Doing lots of, you know how you know a footballer is working hard? I'll do it for you. Lots of little tiny steps like this. That's how you know they're working hard. They're going like from one side to the other side. So that's how you know.
And like Aubameyang seems to be having a kick around. I mean, I sort of wonder if that's a contravention of his contract.
Yeah, we talked about that, but hey.
Yeah, I don't know. But I hope he's got his joie de vivre back, as it were, his va-va-voom. I haven't given up hope that could happen. I know he's an older guy now. I know about age curves and declines and all those things. But I wonder if there's still something there. That we better hope there is.
Yeah. No, I tend to agree. I think last season was an unfortunate cocktail of... many things.
A bit of a perfect storm, I think.
Yeah, exactly. The team didn't create a lot. He got injuries for the first time in a while. He had malaria. There was personal issues off the field, etc., etc. It looks like he is doing his best to kind of rediscover that kind of happiness he has when he's playing football. And, he can only do so much. I think it's worth pointing out as well that he can be as up for it and fit and ready and athletic and all of that. We have to make chances for him. We have to create and that comes back to what we need to do in the transfer market. But look, if he can come back with the batteries fully recharged, ready to go, wipe the slate clean, turn over a new leaf, and all those other things that you can talk about, I think it will be good for us.
Yeah, fingers crossed. We need him.
We
need something like the old Oba.
We do. Okay, right. You go now.
Thank you.
No problem.
I'm actually going to go and have a COVID test, believe it or not. So
can you not do it yourself?
They don't trust me for this one. The nurse comes and does it.
All right, okay.
But,
there's resistance. There's resistance. Stop.
I know. She pushes up. I'm like, please stop, and she just keeps going. It goes in the brain.
Explains a lot, in fairness. But there you go.
It does. It explains a lot.
All right. Well, look.
We'll be back, though.
We will.
Anon.
We'll be back at some point. We'll do some stuff during the week as well. Hopefully for Patreon members, got something coming for you this week. Regular Arsecast on Friday. As always, thank you for being here, and we will catch you on the next one.
Bye-bye.